Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemaphilepod.com. Welcome, Space Brothers is a feature-length documentary film about the Unarius Academy of Science, an extraterrestrial-channeling spiritual school and self-healing community that was established in the 1990s in El Cajon, California, and went on to become a wildly prolific filmmaking collective under the direction of the outlandish spiritual leader and filmmaker Ruth E. Norman, also known as Archangel Uriel. Wow, there's a lot here. And at the end of the day, it's about a very caring, sweet woman who really carved out a life for herself beyond the housewife that we have come to know from the 1960s. This is a woman who was really, truly visionary in the people that came together around her, who loved her, who cared about her, and cared about what she was preaching. Really terrific film. I thoroughly enjoyed. Welcome, Space Brothers. Joining us today is the director, Jodi Wille. Jodi, welcome to Cinemophile.
Well, thank you, Mike, for having me. It's nice to be here.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. I wasn't sure what I was getting into when I started watching it. Boy, does it just pull you through this remarkable story about the life and times of Ruth E. Norman and how she got knocked down and got up and kept moving forward. She had a very specific point of view about the world, the spiritual world, our connection to it, and she was able to pull into her orbit a lot of very creative, interesting, and dedicated people. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get to know about Ruth E. Norman, and what prompted you to make Welcome, Space Brothers?
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate that. And I'll say that I first came across Unarius in the mid 90s. But even before that, as a teenager, I was visiting self-taught artists and visionary artists who were channeling energies, whether they were Christians or, eccentric painters living in their basements. And so I had a background long ago of getting to know unusual thinkers, usually working class or even from middle class sectors of society. But I discovered Unarius in the 90s when I was a music video director and rock band photographer living in Los Angeles. And I had friends who were musicians and rare film collectors, and they would just rave about this group called Unarius and these wild videos that would play weekly on Los Angeles public access. And those friends told me that they would actually tape the videos off the television and make these bootleg videos and trade them with other collectors across country. Some of these were like notable people like Jello Biafra, the punk rock singer of the Dead Kennedys, people like Ann Magnuson, the actress, and they would trade these tapes, and I experienced Unarius too by watching them on television, and it was so wild. I just remember being utterly transfixed by their videos, but nobody really knew much about them or their story, and nobody that I knew understood at all what they were doing with the videos, and basically just thought of them as kooks. So kind of benign but totally crazy spiritual group. And it wasn't until 2014, I guess 2013, when I'm also a curator. So I'm a film director, but I'm also a museum and gallery art curator and a book publisher. And I was invited to curate this National Museum show for the American Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore in 2013. And it was called The Visionary Experience, the show. And I knew I wanted to put Unarius videos in. So I reached out to them and they invited me to come view their archive in their center in El Cajon, California. And I went to view it and I was expecting to just see like maybe a small shelf of films and videos, like a handful. I went into their compound, their complex, and I saw about 1,000 videotapes on the wall. And then I also saw like 200 elaborate handmade costumes. And I saw all of these incredible, like dozens of hand painted, artworks by the students. I was really blown away by the artistic output of the group. And that led me down this yellow brick road of getting to know the Unarians and getting to learn about what they were actually doing in those psychodramas and what their organization was about and just who they were as human beings. And I started showing their own movies in cinematheques across the country and in the UK. International film festivals are very popular. And that led me to just realize that I had to make a documentary on them, especially when I realized just the absolute treasure trove of footage that I had to work with. And that's what led me to it.
Yeah, this documentary, for people listening to our conversation, Welcome Space Brothers, will surprise you at many, many points in the film in terms of getting to know the people, getting to know the sincerity. It's hard to, whatever resistance I had watching this at the beginning of the film, wondering what it was going to turn into, the sincerity, the commitment just kind of swept me away in terms of what they were doing and why. And once you peel back that sort of lo-fi video aspect of their story, you see there's some real substance to what questions they're posing, as well as the idea of religion. And I please correct me if I'm wrong, but they're basically the idea of spirituality. The source of the spirituality is from life outside of our planet as being kind of the source material.
Well, it's interesting because they don't talk about a creator. So they
Right,
don't they don't they don't necessarily talk about God per se. They also do not believe that aliens, extraterrestrials created us. So they believe in an more of like an unknowable universe that is populated with all kinds of beings, physical and spiritual, of
right.
different kinds of agendas. But the Unarians in particular are very interested in communicating with these beings that they consider highly benevolent and advanced and helpful. And what I like about their cosmology, I think it's so interesting and unique, is that it's very much an egalitarian form of spirituality
Yeah.
where there are groups kind of like Unarius that maybe existed, they definitely existed in the early 20th century. They still exist today that claim to channel beings. And it's often like these masters, right? These
Hmm.
spiritual masters. But what I liked about Ruth Norman and her husband, Ernest Norman, was that they talked about these beings as brothers. So they were
Yes.
just like slightly older souls in their, point of view.
Yeah.
And they claimed that if you could basically live a clean life, a decent life, and work on yourself and tune into these invisible, angelic sort of space brother beings, you could not only heal yourself of personal problems, even physical problems, they claimed, but you could also make extraordinary artwork. And creativity was a big part of who they were and part of their spiritual growth, which was a big reason of why I was so attracted to them because I just thought their creative output was just outstanding and vast.
Just yes, just what you said. It is vast. In the encouragement of the members of the church, and we call it a church. I mean,
They do not call it a church.
yeah,
They would
yeah, this
call it a spiritual school.
spiritual school.
Yeah.
And that's another wonderful aspect of this film, Welcome Space Brothers, is that we get to meet people like William Proctor, Vaughn, David, Daniel, Dorothy, the people that we get to spend time with who've been so impacted by it and how they carry forward with their set of beliefs is really, God, you've got some great people to be a part of telling this story. What was that like? Sort of the tracking down some I know there's a fair amount of archival footage in the film, but you're also able to track down a lot of the people who were part of this.
It was. I had spent, at least 7 years getting to know core Unarians, current Unarians, because the group does still exist,
Yeah.
which surprises a lot of people because they've been around since 1954, but they're still they're an existing like volunteer-run nonprofit organization. They still meet 3 times a week. But they had a number of members who were there for a short while or left, or who had a big blowout and left, when
Mm.
when the Space Brothers didn't land. And it was really important for me to track down some of those people who left, to get, and also family members of people who were in the group to just get a broader perspective. It was important for me to also track down these highly respected religious scholars who had spent decades studying and understanding these kinds of groups. That's a whole different level of understanding than somebody who's going in to make a film for HBO where they spend like maybe 6 months or a year with a group. Like
Mhm.
I really wanted to put the time in to get to know people and really get to know who they were as human beings. And I just found the Unarians, past and present, as this very charming,
Yeah.
complex, largely self-aware. I mean, they're all different, it's just like a spectrum of humanity. But a lot of them were pretty eccentric, and I love eccentric people, like just unusual people. And they were funny. I mean, they could laugh, like they just defied the stereotypes that most people have of these kind of fringe spiritual communities. So
Yeah.
it was a joy to get to know them, but it was definitely like, it was a journey. I was like, who was Ruth Norman? What was she like? I really needed to, I wasn't sure for a number of years, like what, she's a mysterious figure, complex and layered. And it was really after interviewing her granddaughter that I felt like I had a very good idea of who she was as a person before she became Archangel Uriel and afterwards. So it took time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're all the better for it because you're right. She's obviously in the film a lot from the footage that we see of the artwork that you were describing that was part of a big part of what they were about. It's this sort of brotherhood of man. There was just a lot of that going on. She came from 3 failed marriages. She was born in 1900, 9 siblings, or one of 9 children
Yeah.
in her family. Really struggled until she met Ernest, and that is when her life really changed. And what I took away from her was a sincerity that I just think it's hard to argue with, and intelligence. And whenever there was kind of a negative dynamic in play, she seemed determined to turn that around into something more of the positive, And is that a fair way to describe her?
I think so. And I think I just want to sort of specify that, she struggled early in life. She came from a very poor, abusive family. She had to start working when she was 12 years old. She had an eighth grade education. But what I found really extraordinary about her was she was able to turn her life around as a single mother during the Depression before Ernest Norman. So
Mm.
it's there, and it kind of it's sort of like breezes by you in the film. But there was a time where she started getting immersed in these communities, these metaphysical communities, like Science of Mind. She was a part of that community that really focused on positive thinking and, working in proactive ways with your issues to know yourself better. But also, these were communities that historically gave women opportunities to have leadership roles and to think of themselves as equals to men and empowered. And she was somehow able to become, she rose up from being a waitress to being a manager of restaurants to buying and selling restaurants in Southern California. She actually, I don't have this in the film, but she actually bought this big area in Big Bear with 13 cabins and rented them out. Like she was a genius for buying real estate and then selling it or a business at a profit. So I was really impressed about that, with her. But it wasn't until she met Ernest Norman where her spiritual life, like her really important work came into focus.
And even though she is the centerpiece of of Unarius. She was also one to push the we and not the I in terms of the group of them. And we see many examples of that in the film, where it was, well, she certainly was, like I said, she was the center in so many ways of what Unarius is and was. She was not one to essentially, it was not a cult of personality. I think that's a probably.
Yeah, like I appreciate you having that observation because at first it looks like it could have been a cult of personality. And it did to me, when I was first in my early years with the material. And I'm not saying that she didn't like attention and that
Yeah.
she didn't like to be loved and have devoted students. But what I learned very, very thoroughly was that she gave it back. Like she loved her students, she cared so much, and she really saw her role as a teacher as her most important role. So even though she may have had moments where she was a human being having human human feelings or human moments, according to the people I interviewed, past and present Unarians, even people who had issues with her and left the group, they were all very consistently talking about how loving she was and how sincere she was and the integrity that she exhibited in, staying true to what she was aiming to help others with.
And it is difficult to overstate, as we were talking earlier, and it's just such a big part of the film. It's difficult to overstate just how much art, how much of the film work that they turned out. And in some ways, that's for many people the legacy of what they did. But I was trying to sort of correlate it with something that may be more familiar to people. And in terms of the outlook of the group, I would say it's, if anyone's familiar with Sun Ra.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that you know Sun Ra because absolutely I was feeling the same thing when I was making the film. Like they're sort of like country cousins or something,
They are.
Like,
Well,
yeah.
Sun Ra is famous for space is the place, and that's sort of stuck with me when watching it. And I will say a little bit, and I don't know if this is sort of the afterglow of people watching so much of the video. Pee Wee Herman seems to have played, or so they had an influence on Pee Wee's Playhouse
Oh,
in a significant way. In my opinion, I'm just
that's so
saying.
funny. Oh my
Does
gosh.
it? Am
I
I
bet
wrong to
I
say it
bet
that
Pee
way?
Wee. I'm sure Pee Wee that Paul Rubens knew of Unarius because a lot of people in Hollywood in that realm, because I know some of those people, a lot of them were sharing the tapes and it
Yeah.
was definitely making the rounds with comedians.
Was it
You know?
Ali Willis? She was part of the formation. She was part of the creative team. There's a bunch of yeah, a bunch of artists who came up. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Pardon.
No, it's true though. I mean, a lot of people were influenced in Hollywood and also in the art world
Yeah.
by Unarius aesthetics and storylines. Although I would wager that most of them did not know what was going on, underneath it. And I didn't either in the 90s. I didn't have the
Yeah.
capacity or the understanding to get to the depth of like what they were really doing. It was only years later after working with other groups like the Source family, the people I did my first documentary on,
Yeah.
another alternative spiritual community,
Yeah.
but actually spending 20 years with a bunch of alternative spiritual communities and very unusual people in that realm that I could return to Unarius, when I was doing the documentary and be like, oh my gosh, they were taking these esoteric ideas that are kind of common to a lot of metaphysical groups, but then taking them to this really advanced place of like experimental healing with the psychodramas that they were doing, by
Yeah.
impersonating what they believed to be their other lifetimes, where they had suffered traumas. They were like reenacting those lifetimes in full wild costume and sets,
Yeah. Yeah.
which looks like a crazy space opera directed by Liberace, to some people. But there was like real healing going on there for some people. And I just felt like that was so rich, to come to that understanding and be able to share that.
And in the film, there's even a nod to Star Wars in a manner of speaking. I mean, it's kind of a sideways sort of look at what they were doing. I forgot the video person who did their videos. I've forgotten
Oh,
his
Dave Osborne, you mean,
Dave
who
Osborne.
directed The
I don't know
Arrival?
who inspired who and whether or not they inspired each other. I have no idea, but there was a kind of a the graphics, if you will, that we see in some of the video is reminiscent, shall we say,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
Star Wars
But
by
a much lower budget, like
well,
a
no, good.
zero budget. I
Yes,
mean, that's what's amazing about Unarius is they had very little money, and these effects that Dave Osborne created were
yeah,
just extraordinary.
yeah,
And a lot of film people, as we mentioned in the film,
yeah.
industry people would look at that and were just baffled that he was able to do all of that himself. Although, of course, he claims the Space Brothers were channeling him the instructions.
Most of the people we see in the film are very much what you would consider to be kind of working class people looking for and who've been through some rough times, maybe not, but they came to this with an open heart. And what what
Yes.
what she brought to them, what Ruth brought to them was a spiritual nurturing sustenance for them to be able to make their lives better. And that's the thing that comes across. And I will tell you, it really takes this film takes you on a journey through their lives, and at the end of it, it's you'd have to be pretty hard-hearted not to feel good about what these people are about and what she was about as well. It just feels like Ruth Norman was quite an impact on people's lives, but I believe her to be as sincere as possible in what she was about. That's
Mm.
like
I really appreciate you saying that. That was really important for me to convey because it's not what most people expect with
no,
stories like this. In fact, it's the opposite of what people expect when they see a group that to them looks like a cult.
yeah,
It's what we're taught in popular culture and by the corporate media to view as something scary or foolish or just delusional at best. And what I've found getting to know a number of groups, not just Unarius and the Source family, but many groups over the last 25 years, that's been a focus of my work and research, but also studying them historically all the way back to the 1700s, is to see that we have this incredibly rich legacy of alternative communities who have existed sometimes in really difficult situations, back in the 1700s when women had no rights,
yeah,
whatsoever. These groups, these communities, metaphysical communities, gave women opportunities for leadership. They invited in people of color, they encouraged members to free their slaves. I just did an exhibition called Utopia, 3 Centuries of Sexuality in American Cults and Communes for a museum in New York City. And I have the archives of 20 communities like Unarius that have existed since the 1700s who were largely benign and who influenced the culture in larger ways. So anyway, that was kind of important to me. I was so happy to, after doing all that research, to find a community like Unarius with such a unique history, but a benign community, and with such a rich archive to be able to really tell the
yeah.
story like in an immersive way.
Beautifully done.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and my congratulations to you on Welcome Space Brothers. And you mentioned the Source family, which I just remembered you were kind enough to come on and talk to me about that because I remember interviewing you now that we're having our conversation, but that was back. That I'm looking here 2013, so that was quite a while ago, and
Oh my gosh, it
yeah.
was.
Well,
I
yeah, I
totally
mean, oh,
forgot
I
about
wouldn't
that.
expect you to remember, but I do when I saw the title come up and I thought, okay, I remember, yeah, and I went to the Source restaurant. I didn't know what it was about. I remember it had vegetarian food, so I'm taking us. That's really what I knew of it, and then later on, when I saw your documentary, I realized, oh, okay, so
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Wow. So you can see a pattern emerging with my work.
I do, but it's a great pattern to be on. And not only are they well done, but there's a sense of this humanity, there's a sense of spirituality, the shared experience we have as human beings, and how we're grappling with what all of that means. And truly a wonderful world to be operating in and do it so effectively. So, Jodi Wille, thank you so very much for your work with not only with this wonderful film, Welcome Space Brothers, but also, as we mentioned, the Source family, and look forward to more.
Oh, Mike, I am honored to be with you again. Thank you so much for having me and for, feeling the way you do about the film. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Thank you. You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.